Yes, good morning. So today's class will be on environmental organization. Okay? Now, do you have any doubts from yesterday's class? Were you able to follow the notes? Yes? Did you have a look at the past question papers? The past questions which were there in the file itself. The Word document at the end had past questions on government schemes. Did you go through them? Okay. All right. You're all appearing for Prelims 2018? Yes. Okay. All right. So, okay, we'll start today's class. Now, today what we will do is, yes, I can hear what you're talking. Yes? Yes. Okay. So now, environmental organization. Why are we focusing on this part in current affairs? Let's first understand its relevance. Around 15 to 20 questions in prelims since 2015. Okay? So for the last 3 years, we have seen around 15 to 20 questions from international organizations. Now, international organizations include the class which Uday sir will take, which will include your geopolitical, economic organization plus environmental organizations. Clear? For example, if you look at 2017's paper, there were only 3 or 4 questions from environmental organization and major questions, around 15 questions from international organization. If you look at 2016's paper, some 9 or 10 questions from environmental organization and 5-6 questions from geopolitical organization, alright. So this trend has changed for the last 3 years. The combination of environmental and geopolitical organization varying. But still this entire international organization is a very important topic, alright. And it is not important that that organization should have been in current affairs, but if it's a organization which UPSC thinks that you must at least be knowing, questions can be reflected in the prelims paper. Clear? So what have we done? We have taken an effort to cover as much as environmental organizations possible in the class. Now, generally this is out of coverage of traditional subject areas like polity, history, geography, economy. Dedicate 3 hours separately and try to finish all of them. Absence of any standard material in spite of being an intensive scoring area. So there are different institutes which have released different material, but there is no material like, let's say there's Lakshmikant for polity or there's Bipin Chandra for modern Indian history. That way there is no standard material which every UPSC aspirant is following. So everybody is following different material. So that's the reason we said why not have a class and try to discuss all these organizations. Okay? Yes. So now again, what do we focus on? Because if you try to go on Google or go into the ministry, if you go into the ministry, if you go into these organizations' website, there is too much of information. What to read, what not to read. And do we read Wikipedia? Definitely not. So, analysis of previous year's papers has revealed the following interest of UPSC. So, since 2015, see even before 2015, 2013-14 also had questions from environmental and international organization. It was just that the number was not 15. It was only 9 or 10. That is the reason I said since 2015. But the trend has been the same. UPSC is only interested to know these 6 or 7 things about any international organization. What are they? First, origin of that organization or treaty. Where did it originate? Did it originate with the United Nations or as a combination of 2 or more organizations? Let's say for example UNEP and WWF come together and start an organization, or WHO and Food and Agricultural Organization come together and start up something. So origin of any international organization has been the interest of UPSC since last few years. Number 2, is it an intergovernmental organization or is it an NGO? Yes, we've seen a lot of questions like that. Amnesty International is what? Is been in news. What is it? I think then there was a question, Doctors Without Borders. What is it? So they're just interested to know, are you following whether an organization is a part of UN or is a part of intergovernment, or is it just an NGO? What is the main purpose or objective behind it? Now, every environmental convention, let's say for example, whether it's WWF or it's UNICEF or it's UNEP or it is traffic, all are environmental organizations. But what is the main objective why they were set up? That UPSC is interested to test if the candidate is aware of it. 4, is the organization or treaty legally binding or voluntary? Clear? So for example, if we talk about Montreal Protocol, UPSC is interested to know, does the candidate know if Montreal Protocol binds Indian government or not? Clear? Why? Because you're going to be a part of the government. Next, membership of India. This is very obvious. So anything in news, UPSC will want to know if the candidate is aware India's membership status in it. Their funding mechanisms. So there have been questions on biocarbon fund, there have been questions on global environment facility, and there are still many more funding mechanisms. UPSC has also tested the funding mechanisms of these environmental organizations. Why so? Because the main concern with every environmental organization is they all talk great things. Everybody wants to save environment, everybody wants to save tiger, everybody wants to save whales, everybody wants to save ozone layer, everything is great. Where will the money come from? So funding has been a major concern. So that's another area of interest for the UPSC. And finally, some important terminology. Let's say for example, global warming potential, or let's say intended nationally determined contribution, greenhouse protocol. So whichever terminology appears in the news related to that organization, that UPSC is interested to know, are you aware what this terminology means? Clear? So when we look through the class, we will try to remember these important facts. Alright? So we will try to understand where did it originate, what is the purpose, is it binding India or not, is India a member of it or not? Clear? Now, for the June batch students, I would have already done environmental organizations extended in 2 classes. So for you, this would be like a revision class. And for the new students and the October batch students, this would be your first exposure to all environmental organizations. So I will take it slow in the first half of the class because there will be too much of content coming in. Clear? So we will try to keep it little slow. Try to understand the logic behind every organization, and wherever you have a doubt, please raise your hand. Okay? Can I move ahead? Yes. Okay. Now this will be the overview of the total class. We will first start with Rio Summit and related outcomes. We will then move to ecosystem related organization, then plant and animal protection related organization, then we will look at protection of ozone layer, pollution related organizations, funding mechanisms for all these organizations, and then the policy support mechanism. Is this clear? Why are we doing this classification? Just for you to classify. Somewhere it's a sort of mind mapping. You remember that, okay, this organization comes here. So when it appears in the exam, you can easily relate whether the objective given in the question paper is correct or not. Okay? So merely for our revision purpose or for our own understanding, we have classified the class into 7 parts. Can we move ahead? So the biggest summit that we talk about whenever we talk about environment is the Rio Summit. Yes or no? Rio plus 10, Rio plus 20. These are the terminology which frequently appear. So we will start the class with Rio Summit. Look into your notes. Now what you will have to know is what was so important about the Rio Summit. Rio Summit was the first time in the world when every country spoke about environmental protection. See, until then the concern was always on development, and it was fair enough because after the 1940-1945 Second World War, most of the European countries were devastated. All the Asian African countries were underdeveloped because they had just got independence. So what will they talk about? They were only talking about industrialization, development. So next 4 or 5 decades went in talking about industrialization and development. Suddenly they realized that in the race for development, we have damaged the environment so much that now it's starting to harm us. So then there was this Rio Summit where they spoke about environmental protection. So that's why this conference was very important, and this conference was a result of some of the discussions in a report called Brookland Report. So in your notes, second point, Brookland Report. This word is important. You might have to remember this, all right? So a consequence of the discussion in Brookland Report was the Rio Summit. Now, what happened? They all discussed about environment. Industrialized countries, so US was developed, Europe was developed, they said development is only causing all these environmental problems, so let's stop development. Is that fair enough? No. It is fair enough for the developed countries because you already developed, but our development was yet to come. So the developing countries did not agree to it. And also, again, the major concern there was, all of us want to protect environment, but where will the money come from? So the major concern was around finance and consumption rates and population growth. Look at the fourth point. The major Earth Summit arguments concern finance, consumption rates and population growth. These were the discussions. However, they were successful because they came out with 4 important conventions at the Rio Summit. What are the important Rio outcomes? UNFCCC, Convention on Biodiversity, United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification, Principles of Forest Management and Agenda 21. Out of which the first 3 are called Rio Conventions. Alright? United Nations Convention on United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, Convention on Biodiversity and United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification. These are the 3 important conventions. What did this convention discuss? UNFCCC discussed climate change. Why are the monsoons becoming irregular? Why are the frequent or irregular? Why is the global temperature rising? Why are the sea levels rising? All right, so all this concerns climate change. This was discussed at UNFCCC. At CBD, Convention on Biodiversity, they discussed about protecting the biodiversity, the different resources of plants and animals. At UNCCD, they discussed about land management. So what did they find? They found that large areas of land were becoming deserted because of deforestation. So there were a lot of drylands, lot of semi-drylands. So how to take care of semi-drylands and their issue was the main concern of UNCCD. And finally, Agenda 21 was on sustainable development. Clear? Now what you have to remember, number 1, 2 and 3, that is UNFCCC, CBD and UNCCD, these 3 were called Rio Conventions and they were legally binding on all countries. Agenda 21 was voluntary. It was just a document saying all countries should do so. But no country was bound to follow the principles of Agenda 21. So do you think Agenda 21 would have succeeded? Definitely not. Even if something is binding on us, we think 100 times to obey it. So if something is not binding, we might as well take it for granted. Agenda 21 was not binding on us. Clear? Now coming to UNFCCC. Now what we will do, each of these conventions had resultant protocols with them. Clear? So you would have seen as you've read the newspaper, let's say Montreal Protocol, Kyoto Protocol, Nagoya Protocol, Cartagena Protocol, so many names. We will try to give all of them a structure and see how do we remember them for the exam. Okay? One keyword which reminds you the entire story of that protocol. Starting with UNFCCC, so it's about climate change. So what was the main purpose of UNFCCC? Arrest bring down the concentration of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, alright? Because the main reason for climate change was lot of release of greenhouse gas into the atmosphere. So when greenhouse gas get released into the atmosphere, the temperature increases. Clear? So the main concern or the main objective of UNFCCC was to arrest. So look at your notes, what is given in italic under UNFCCC, stabilization of greenhouse gas concentrations in the atmosphere at a level that would prevent dangerous anthropogenic interference with climate change. This was the main objective of United Nations framework on climate change. Clear? Now, at the convention, what did they say? They clearly said, see, because this is not now. This is not when Paris Agreement was signed. This was years before, 1990s. Developing countries would have definitely not taken any responsibility. So the convention itself said that developed countries will take the leadership and then developing countries will slowly follow. Clear? So after that, a convention means an area of discussion. Now there should be something which binds the convention. Clear? For example, you have a class. You all come to the class, listen to the class and go. Unless you are given a test to check how far you have understood the class, the input output is, we have not really understood how far you followed. Clear? So similarly for the convention was a mere place for discussion. They had to operationalize an instrument which bound the countries to listen to the convention. Clear? That's how Kyoto Protocol came. A protocol means it's legally binding. It binds all the countries. It's like an instrument. It's like, see, in India, you can, when you look at marriage as a concept, you can easily call a guy or girl and say, I like this, and it's okay. But do they accept that as marriage? You have to, if you're a Hindu, you have to do those 7 rounds. If you're a Muslim, you have to probably go to the mosque. If you're a Christian, you have to finish that custom to establish that institution. Similarly, all these protocols are customs to establish a legal binding obligation on the country. Are you able to follow? These are protocols. So any protocol is generally legally binding because it binds the country to do something. Now Kyoto Protocol came in to bind the countries to listen to UNFCCC. So what would be the objective of Kyoto Protocol? Stabilization of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. Okay, it was the same thing. It just operationalized UNFCCC. Look at that in your notes. Second line, second statement there. Kyoto is what operationalizes the convention. Now, what was the specialty of Kyoto? They said we will bring down greenhouse gases. Who will bring down? Developed or developing countries? Kyoto clearly said only developed countries will bring down greenhouse gases. So India was free. Okay? US, Europe, Germany, France, all of them were now bound to bring down the greenhouse gases to certain levels. Did Kyoto Protocol specify the levels? Yes. They sent binding reduction targets on all European countries. Clear? See, these are all the special features of Kyoto Protocol, and that's why, if you understand, it failed. Okay? See, one, it asked only developed countries to do something, and it gave concession to developing countries. So that was one reason developed countries would not do. Number, they also set binding targets for the developed countries. Again, a reason for their failure. Clear? So look at the the next statement, third statement in fact. It said binding emission reduction targets for the 7 industrialized countries and European community in the first commitment period. It only binds developed countries. Another reason why it failed. And there is one terminology which is associated with Kyoto Protocol, which is CBR, Common but Differentiated Responsibility. In the next statement you would see CBR, Common but Differentiated Responsibility. What does this mean? What is common, what is differentiated? Differentiated is sending individual targets to whom? Industrialized countries. Okay, and what is common? Okay. Okay, the goal is common. They all want to reduce greenhouse gases, but every country has a different target. Why do you think they gave a common but differentiated responsibility to the developed countries? Developed countries have only contributed to all these global the global warming. So let's say, for example, in America or in Europe, industrial revolution has almost been there for last 100 years. Yes, since 1800s they've been having industrial revolution. So for 100 or 100 and odd years they've been adding greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. For countries like India, 1947 only we got our independence. After that we had to think about poverty, agriculture. Then it took so many years for some prime minister to come and say our manufacturing has not grown, and then Make in India came. Clear? So what do we see? It was the developed countries which added all the most of the greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. So they will take the responsibility, and that's why it's called, they are historically responsible for the global warming. So that is why this principle originated, common but differentiated responsibility. Everybody's common goal was to protect the environment from greenhouse gases, but it would be differentiated because of different historic emissions from different countries. Clear? So this terminology is associated with which protocol? Kyoto Protocol. And why is it that the countries had common but differentiated responsibilities? Because their historic contribution to greenhouse gases was different. Clear? Industrialization took place at different time periods in different countries. Are you able to follow? Alright. So these are the important points related to Kyoto Protocol. What do we eventually know? Kyoto Protocol failed. But whenever something fails, what do? We try to revive it. So 2008 to 2012 was the first commitment period of Kyoto Protocol. Kyoto failed. Again, countries made an effort, and now we have entered into second commitment period of Kyoto Protocol, which is from 2013 to 2020. Clear? See, it's the developed world. They cannot just say we have failed. So they will say, no, we are trying to commit themselves and start a second commitment period. Clear? So let's try to summarize Kyoto Protocol. Kyoto Protocol was nothing but here. Okay, so the first arm of UNFCCC is the Kyoto Protocol. Now, Kyoto Protocol said the developed countries will take responsibility for the greenhouse gases. It also said developed countries will take binding emission targets for the greenhouse gases, and that is the reason it failed. And why did it give the developed countries binding emission targets? Because it believed in a principle called common but differentiated responsibility. Why common but differentiated responsibility? Because the historic contribution of every country to global warming has been different because of different industrial revolution periods. Clear? The first commitment period is over in 2012. Now we are in the second commitment period of Kyoto Protocol. And where is Kyoto Protocol? Where did it originate? It originated in UNFCCC. Clear? The first thing I said, we have to know where did anything originate. It originated in UNFCCC. Now, Kyoto was talking great things. There has to be a way in which Kyoto is implemented. Clear? Now, it's great to say I want to clear prelims. How do you clear prelims? That's your strategy. Kyoto said developed countries will bring down greenhouse gases. How will they bring down greenhouse gases? Will they break their industries? Will they break all their automobiles? No. So there has to be a mechanism in which a developed country is able to bring down their greenhouse gases. Yes or no? So they came up with 3 mechanisms for Kyoto Protocol. It's called Clean Development Mechanism, Joint Implementation, and Emissions Trading. Clear? So what are we discussing now? So when we look at the last part here, these are basically the mechanisms of Kyoto Protocol. Clean Development Mechanism, Joint Implementation, and Emissions Trading. Now, how do you think, and even before we understand all this terminology, how do you think can a developed country bring down greenhouse gas in the atmosphere? Already there is so much concentration. How can they bring down greenhouse gases? Yes? Technology. Okay, moving to clean technology. Okay, what else? Clean technology is cheap or expensive? Expensive? Using a plastic is cheaper or using a eco-friendly bag is cheaper? Plastic is definitely cheaper. So any clean technology will only be expensive. Developed countries can still afford them. Okay? Okay, that's one way. What else? How can you bring down greenhouse gases? Okay, leave about developed countries. How can you bring down greenhouse gases? Yes? What did you say? C. Air conditioners. Okay, not use air conditioners. Okay. No, I need this for the class today. What can you do? Controlled emissions. No, I'm asking what can you do as an individual? Forget about developed countries. As a developed individual, what can you do to bring down greenhouse gases? Okay, use public transport. Okay. Yes? Yes, you can plant trees. That is the best thing, I think, first thing they taught in school. Clear? First thing you can do is you can, okay, by planting trees. Now understand, by planting trees or by moving to clean technology, yes, I can bring down greenhouse gases in my own country. So that's one mechanism. Clear? That is, you bring down greenhouse gases in your own country. Plant trees in your country or move to green technology. Another thing is, what we see in, what is generally a feature of Indian society. There can be 100 problems at home, but we are interested in neighbors' problems. Yes? So there can be 100 ways to get sustainable development in your country. But then we would think of why not help the nearby country. So what can you do? You can give this clean technology to another developed country and tell, you use it and bring down greenhouse gases, I will take the credit. Can we do that? Whether we can do or not, UNFCCC and Kyoto Protocol accepts that. Clear? Either you try to bring down greenhouse gases in your own country, and if you can't do it, it's okay. You at least try to help another country. Clear? So that's the second mechanism. Now, when you're helping another country, you have two choices. You can either help somebody who's of your status or somebody who's of a lesser status. Yes? So where you help somebody, let's say for example, if US is helping Germany, then that's a developed country helping another developed country. If US helps India, developed country helping another developing country. Clear? So this becomes two different mechanisms of Kyoto. Developed country helps another developed country to bring down greenhouse gases. That is called joint implementation. Clear? A developed country helping another developed country to bring down greenhouse gases is called joint implementation. Because joint means partnership, right? Generally, whom do you make partnership with? With whom you are equal. Yes, in India, marriages also happen with equal status. Okay? Yes. Next, what is clean development mechanism? Developed country helping another developing country to bring down greenhouse gases. Are you able to follow? Both these are neighborhood stories. Okay? The first thing what you have to do is you have to plant trees, you have to bring clean technology in your own country. That is not a mechanism at all, because that's what Kyoto says you have to do. But most of the developed countries are not happy to do that. So Kyoto said, okay, I'll give you 3 more options. You help your own status country to bring down greenhouse gases in the name of joint implementation. If you are not able to convince another developed country, go to another developing country like India, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, Bangladesh. Give them clean technology. You take the credit. That is called clean development mechanism. Are you able to follow? That is why CDM and JI are called project-based mechanisms of Kyoto Protocol. Okay? Project-based mechanism. You do a project in another country, you take the credit. Yes? You do a project in another developing country, you take the credit. Come to your notes, we will look at important points and I will read through the notes, see if you are able to follow. Yes? We are just going to look at CDM and joint implementation now. we'll forget emissions trading. So Kyoto, what did Kyoto say? Look at in mechanism of Kyoto Protocol, look at the second statement. Kyoto Protocol countries bound to targets have to meet them largely through domestic action. Kyoto Protocol said, listen, first majority of the effort should be in-house, in your own country. That was given in Kyoto Protocol. Although it knew developed countries will not listen to them, so they set up mechanisms. That is to reduce their emissions on their own shores. However, there were three mechanisms: CDM, JI, emissions trading. CDM and JI are two project-based mechanisms. What does that mean? Project-based mechanism. How do I bring down greenhouse gas in another country? I give them some technology. Let's say, for example, if US gives India a technology of producing an automobile which releases less carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. So we are saving release of greenhouse gases. Clear? They might give us, let's say, for example, the technology of a nuclear power plant or a thermal power plant where we do not release enough of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Then it's called a clean technology. Yes? In fact, I think we would have spoken about, I think for the June batch, methanol economy fund. You remember? Yes, for the other students, see, Niti Aayog has proposed establishment of methanol economy fund in the last few months. That's a clean development technology. Note that down for those who are not aware, and please go and see, it could be an important area for your prelims. So methanol economy fund is also a clean technology where we are trying to use more of methanol instead of the convention fuels to bring down greenhouse gases. So similarly, these are project-based mechanisms. Are you able to follow CDM and JI? Yes? When a developed country tries to bring down greenhouse gas emission in a developed country, it's called joint implementation. When a developed country tries to bring down greenhouse gases in their developing country, it's called clean development mechanism. Now, apart from that, apart from being a person who is trying to help everybody, there's another way to do business. Listen. I had a target of producing 100 units of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. I have released only 40. I have 60. What will be the incentive for me to save the 60? Let's say, for example, if we give you, now let's say, for example, I am giving you a choice. You have to complete this paper in 2 hours, okay? If you complete the paper within 1.5 hours, we will give you an extra 10 marks in the exam. What will happen? 1.5 hours, all of you will be out of the exam hall. Yes? Or an incentive like this, leave the exam hall. If you finish your homework within time, all of you will be given an ice cream for children. There should be an incentive, correct? Similarly, for greenhouse gases, every country was given an incentive to save their targets for greenhouse gases. How do you incentivize countries? Not through ice creams, not through marks. How? It's money. Everything in this world is money, all right? Pure economics. So how do you incentivize money? What did they do? They made carbon dioxide a commodity. Whatever unused units of carbon dioxide units you have, you may sell it to any other country and earn money. Will this incentivize a country to save carbon dioxide? Definitely yes. So countries will start moving to green or cleaner technology, and that is nothing but emissions trading. Alright, this was the last mechanism of Kyoto Protocol. In fact, although Kyoto has failed, emissions trading, clean development mechanism and joint implementation have been implemented to certain extent. Okay, all these developed countries didn't do anything in their own country, but yes, they did help other countries. They made some money with emissions trading. So look at this. CDM involves investment in emission reduction or removal enhancement projects in developing countries that contribute to sustainable development, while JI enables developed countries to carry out emission reduction or removal enhancement projects in other developed countries. Emissions trading allows countries that have emission units to spare which are permitted to them but not used, to sell this excess capacity to countries. If you remember this, it's enough. If you have an emission reduction target, something which is allotted to you, you've not used, you can sell it and make money. Clear? Are these mechanisms interesting? Yes, at least they can incentivize the developed country to bring down greenhouse gases, alright. So this is how Kyoto Protocol was made to function. It was a failure, but still to some extent emissions trading took place, CDM took place, JI took place. Okay? And for developing countries also, CDM was a good choice to get some technology from the developed countries. Can we move ahead? Now we will look at the second important outcome of UNFCCC. What do these outcomes mean? See, UNFCCC are nothing but a group of countries, let's say 192, 193 countries which have signed that convention. They keep meeting every year. Every year they meet, but there are only very few years when they come out with very important outcomes. Those important outcomes are only what we discuss. Kyoto Protocol, Warsaw International Mechanism of Loss and Damage, Paris Agreement. Paris Agreement was important the year before last. This year when UNFCCC met, they did not really make any great discussion or great outcome. Clear? So we are just looking at the important outcomes of UNFCCC. The next was Warsaw International Mechanism of Loss and Damage. What did they discuss there? So they said it was established in 2013, and look at the second objective. It said that if any loss or damage arises out of impact of climate change, we will try to compensate those developing countries. Clear? To address the loss and damage which is arising out of climate change issues to the developing countries. How can loss and damage happen because of climate change? Rising sea level can erode the coastal shores. If coastal areas are eroded, it could be a loss of property. If because of climate change, cyclones become intensive and frequent, what can happen? Heavy damage to life and property. If monsoons fail because of climate change, what will happen to agriculture? Ruin. The entire economy which depends on agriculture, ruin. So there can be loss and damage arising out of climate change. To address all of that, Warsaw International Mechanism of Loss and Damage was set up. Is this clear? That's it. If you remember this much, Warsaw is over. No mechanism, nothing. Then we had the Paris Agreement of 2016. Now, Paris Agreement was a landmark agreement. In fact, even now when you read the newspaper, there will be a lot of reference to the Paris Agreement. So we have to know what was very special about the Paris Agreement. Now, if I have to tell you what is special about something, I have to compare it with something. Yes, I can just say this is special because this is like this, this is like this. When compared to something like this, this has become better. So we will now compare Kyoto Protocol and Paris Agreement and see why was Paris Agreement significant. First point about Kyoto Protocol, whom did Kyoto Protocol bind? Paris Agreement said, here onwards the responsibility for climate change will be both on developed and developing countries. Does it become special? Yes. Kyoto said binding emission targets for developed countries. What did Paris Agreement say? They said we are not giving you any targets. You determine, each country determine your own capacity to be able to contribute to climate change. That's a paradigm shift in the way we are operating for climate change. Clear? On one hand, they said it is only the developed country have to listen to my targets. Paris said no, you give your own contribution and you may fulfill them. Clear? Then number 3, Kyoto has been a failure so far. Paris we are yet to see, so we cannot really say what goes about it. Clear? So the speciality of Paris Agreement was it bound or it placed the responsibility on both developed and developing countries for climate change, and it said no binding targets, you set up your own national determined contribution. Clear? Okay, just go ahead and look. Paris Agreement, first statement, for the first time brings all nations to a common cause to undertake ambitious change. Second statement, strengthen the global cause. For what? It said global temperature rise should be at least below 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial level, and we have to try to ensure that the global temperatures don't increase beyond 1.5 degrees Celsius. Clear? They only fixed about targets about rising temperatures. They did not say you do, this country do so much, this country do so much. No. They said that collectively we have to ensure that our Earth's temperature does not increase beyond 2 degrees Celsius. Finally, nationally determined contribution, that heading, you have to know what this terminology means. It says let all countries put their best efforts to nationally determined contribution and strengthen their efforts in the years ahead. So they, according to their own finance, according to their own development goals, according to their own 5-year plans, they can come up with their national determined contribution. Is this clear? Yes? With this, UNFCCC comes to an end. Yes? So what have we seen? We have just seen one important Rio Convention from the Rio Summit, which is the UNFCCC. Obviously, if so much was discussed, money is needed. So they had to establish a special funding mechanism for this United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. And that funding mechanism is Green Climate Fund, GCF. So far, among the funding mechanism, there has been no question on Green Climate Fund. So you may focus, all right? Because there are few funding mechanisms. I will keep indicating to you which has been asked, which has not been asked. Green Climate Fund has not been asked so far. Now, the first question is, Green Climate Fund gets money from where? Both developed and developing countries, whoever has signed UNFCCC. Okay. Now, what is the purpose of Green Climate Fund? To give money for climate change. Yes, okay. Its purpose is to only support the activities of UNFCCC. Why am I discussing? It looks very simple because when we look at the other funding mechanisms, we will see what is the difference. Clear? GCF was set up by the parties of UNFCCC to use the money only for UNFCCC activities. So they can use this money only for climate change. They cannot use the money for biodiversity protection, environmental protection, animal protection, nothing. Okay, only for climate change. So GCF, it was set up by 194 countries who are parties to United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. And look at the fourth point, focus areas. It focuses on both mitigation and adaptation. Now we have to know what these two terminology mean. Mitigation and adaptation. Mitigation and adaptation are related to what? Yes? Related to? No, I was not able to hear you. Carbon emissions. Okay, so both are related to carbon emissions. What is the difference between mitigation and adaptation? Mitigation is to? Alert. Okay. To adapt the place. Okay. Okay. I'll give you two examples. One is of mitigation, one is of adaptation. Clear? Climate is changing. We are all seeing it's too hot. We are not able to adapt to the rising temperatures. So all of us have started having ACs at home. Is it mitigation or adaptation? Adaptation. Yes? Similarly, a little more complex example in the same lines. Monsoons are failing, water scarcity is rising, pests are increasing because of rising temperatures. So, I have started changing the variety of seeds which I grow in my soil. Is it mitigation or adaptation? It's adaptation. Okay, just because I said one will be mitigation, all of you blindly said adaptation. Yes, thank you. You make me believe that I know you more. Okay, all right. Okay, so understand, I'll repeat this example. This is for climate change. Temperatures are rising, monsoon is failing, water scarcity is increasing. We are changing our seeds from the normal seeds to water resistant seeds or high yielding seeds. We are adapting to climate change. So that's a form of adaptation. Clear? Let's say for example, when sea level rises, will we be able to stop coastal erosion? No, we will not be able to stop. Coastal areas will slowly get eroded. How do you adapt yourself? You can only move your coastal communities in the hinterland. That is only possible. So these are adaptation measures. Now coming to mitigation. Let's say we are all in Delhi now. Temperatures are rising because of, and the main reason for rising temperature is pollution. So let's say we are a part of Arvind Kejriwal government and we announce a policy, odd even policy. So on certain days, only cars with cars ending with odd numbers will run. On certain days, cars ending with even numbers will run. What is this? It's a mitigation strategy. Why? Because we know that automobiles are contributing to majority of the greenhouse gases. I will try to bring down the amount of emission of greenhouse gas in the atmosphere. How? Through a policy. Yes? Let's say for example, if all of you resolve to take the public transport instead of bringing your own cars or two-wheelers, what are we doing? We are all giving our best to bring down greenhouse gases. This is called mitigation. Is this clear? So if we try to reduce the use of fertilizers in soil, we are trying to protect the soil. That's mitigation. Clear? Climate change has to be addressed in both the ways. Things which can be mitigated have to be mitigated. There are things which cannot be done. You cannot do anything about it. Sea levels will rise, coastal areas will be eroded. All island countries in few years will totally get submerged. Can we do anything about it? We can't do. You can only adapt to it. Clear? So GCF gives funding for both mitigation and adaptation measures. Clear? So that's why you have to know this terminology, mitigation and adaptation, and they are related to only climate change and nothing else. Yes? Can we move ahead? So here we finish United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Next we have Convention on Biodiversity. Now are you all able to follow so far? Those who are learning this for the first time? Yes? Students at the end? Yes? Okay. So we move ahead to Convention on Biodiversity. This is the second important Rio Convention which provides a legal framework for action on biodiversity. Even before we look at this, if you can look into the notes, we can make it even more simpler. There are three objectives of this convention: conservation of biodiversity, sustainable use of components, and fair and equitable sharing of benefits arising out of utilization of genetic resources, appropriate access to genetic resources, and by appropriate transfer of relevant technologies, taking into account all rights over those resources and technologies. You will be wondering who wrote all this language, right? IAS officers, okay, either of our country or some other country, okay. So this convention basically wanted to protect biodiversity. Biodiversity means it could be any plant, any animal, or any living organism, clear? It had three main objectives: conservation of biodiversity, so which is very much understandable, just try to protect all biodiversity. For this first objective, the convention established a unique Aichi targets. You just note it down there. So convention had three objectives and they had three resultant protocols. Clear? Aichi was not a protocol, it was like a voluntary action. But just note down, three objectives and three resultant outcomes. To protect biodiversity, they had Aichi targets. Their second objective was sustainable use of component and fair and equitable sharing of benefits arising out of utilization of genetic resources. Okay? In short, what does this statement mean? Neem is indigenous to which country? India. If any other country wants to use neem to make some medicine, whom should they give benefit to? they should give some credit to India because India as a genetic resource neem as a genetic resource belongs to India. I repeat, what does this entire second statement mean? Take any genetic resource, neem or turmeric. If any foreign country, let's say for example, a US company wants to make a medicine out of neem, they ought to give the benefit to the Indian community because neem belongs to India. Okay, that's what the term means. Sustainable use of component and fair and equitable sharing of benefit. In fact, this is the main word, fair and equitable sharing. Clear? That's why Nagoya Protocol, if you look at this, it's called equitable access and benefit sharing. Okay? So everybody should be able to access genetic resource, but the benefit should accrue to the country which actually has that genetic resource, and also to the country which is making the discovery or the invention. Clear? This is taken care by Nagoya Protocol. The third objective, which is appropriate access to genetic resources and by appropriate transfer of relevant technology, taking into account all rights over those resources and technology. This is Cartagena Protocol. It's generally called Cartagena Protocol on Biosafety. What does that mean? If any genetic resource is moving from one country to another country, it should not harm the ecosystem or let's say human or animal life of that country. Clear? See, because genetic resource can include a bacteria, it can include an inactive organism, it can be anything in the form of vaccine. Okay? So it can even be a small plant which is grown in another country, but once you grow it in the other country, it destroys the native species of that country. So that's a threat to that country. Clear? So when any genetic resource moves from one country to another country, it should not disturb the ecosystem or any life in that other country. So that's why it's called biosafety. It's called Cartagena Protocol on Biosafety. Clear? Convention on Biodiversity had three important objectives. Conserve biodiversity, so they set up Aichi targets. Then they set fair and equitable sharing of the genetic resources. So they set up Nagoya Protocol. Then they had safe access, transfer, handling of the genetic resources. So that's why they set up Cartagena Protocol on Biosafety. Is this clear? Nagoya is on equitable access and benefit sharing. Cartagena is on biosafety. Okay? Find out a way, maybe some easy story which you can make. Let's say biosafety is Cartagena and biosafety. So it's BC. Yes? So which you can easily remember. BC, biosafety, Cartagena Protocol. Access and benefit sharing, Nagoya. Make some stories so that you can remember them. Clear? Now we'll go ahead and look at what do they mean in detail. Before that, what we are doing in Cartagena is, how will Cartagena, implemented. So for UNFCCC, money came from GCF. For CBD, money will come from GEF. What is GEF? It's Global Environment Facility. Alright. So Global Environment Facility is the funding mechanism for CBD. So in your notes, let's cover Global Environment Facility first and then come to all of these. After Agenda 21, you have Global Environment Facility. Just open that because we've just done GCF. So if you do Global Environment Facility along with this, it's very easy for you. Can I start? Global Environment Facility. So rather than going through the notes, we'll make it very simple. We will first see what is GCF and then see how GEF is different. Who set up GCF? All UNFCCC parties. Who set up GEF? Exactly. So you will write all CVD parties, then I will say no. Okay? No, that's how, see, that's how you study and then you correct yourself. So you remember, GEF was not set up by the parties of CBD, rather a lot of international organizations, World Bank, everybody started contributing and coming. Clear? Where is that in the note? In the notes you will see second paragraph, a unique partnership, underline that, of 18 agencies. United Nations is also there, multilateral development banks are there, countries are there, international NGOs are there, some 183 countries are there, everybody is contributing to GEF. Clear? GCF, only parties to UNFCCC. GEF, unique partnership with 18 different agencies. Clear? Okay. GCF gives money for what? Climate change. GEF gives money for what? Along with biodiversity, because they get money from so many places, they also give money for so many reasons. Alright? GEF funds 5 important conventions. What are they? Look at the next paragraph. A financial mechanism for 5 major international conventions. Alright? Compare and study, that's the easiest way. So GEF is a financial mechanism for 5 major international environmental conventions. What are they? You know 3 Rio conventions? So write first, UNFCCC, CBD, UNCCD. Apart from that, there are 2 other conventions. One is Stockholm Convention on Persistent Organic Pollutants and Minamata Convention on Mercury. Ma'am, what are they? Wait. By the end of this class, we will know all conventions, okay? And everything will be roaming in the head, dancing in the head in fact, because there will be less space to fit in. Clear? So GEF will be funding how many mechanisms? 5. GCF funds how many mechanisms? 1. Clear? This is the main difference and here it gets over. In fact, you can just open Global Environment Facility. I will just read the first line. See, what we are doing in the class is looking at only the important points. Rest of the notes are for you. If you are interested, you can go through in detail. Alright. GEF was established on the eve of 1992 summit. So GEF was also established in the Rio Summit itself. Alright. That you have to remember. The origin of GEF is in Rio Summit. Because I told you, UPSC is interested to know where did something originate. It originated in the Rio Summit only. Now, we have seen GEF. Are we ready to go to Cartagena Protocol? Yes, come back. Let's start with Cartagena Protocol. So, convention protocols, we have 2 convention protocols. Cartagena Protocol on Biosafety and Nagoya Protocol. IC targets are not binding, that's why they are not called a protocol. Clear? So coming to Cartagena Protocol, you can call it Cartagena Protocol on Biosafety or you can call it Cartagena Protocol on Safe Handling, Transport and Use of Living Modified Organism. In the objectives first line, it aims to ensure safe handling, transport and use of living modified organism resulting from modern biotechnology that may have adverse effect on biological diversity taking into account human health. So what does it say? If a country is sending one genetic resource to another country, they should be very careful in the way they handle their genetic resource, in the way they transfer the genetic resource, and they should also communicate to the other country what are the dangers that this genetic resource may bring to your environment, animal or human life. Is this clear? So that's called biosafety. Cartagena Protocol follows a special approach called precautionary approach. Underline that. What is biosafety? There you will have in the third line, precautionary approach. What does precautionary approach mean? even if you have the slightest doubt that this genetic resource can cause damage to the environment, even if you have the slightest doubt, you will not even move it. Clear? In fact, now if you try to relate this to what is happening in India with GM crops. When GM crops are coming, there is still fear. What if it damages the environment? Yes, if you follow the precautionary approach, then you will not bring GM crops to India. Because even today, there are studies which say that GM might lead to change in soil fertility, or GM might somehow bring down productivity in the longer run. Yes or no? GM might lead to some diseases. GM might change the food chain of that particular ecosystem. So precautionary approach says that even if you have that a doubt that there is a slightest risk to any human health or to the ecosystem, you will not transfer that genetic resource. And this is the basic principle of Cartagena Protocol. Clear? Now what are living modified organisms? Because the first objective itself says safe handling, transport and use of living modified organisms. Modified organism means what? What can you modify in an organism? Genes. Yes? So that's basically genetic engineering. So when you are transferring a genetically modified organism from one country to another, where do we what are the applications of GM products? Yes? Pesticides? Pest resistant crops, okay. High yielding crops, yes. Also in some of the vaccines you've got inactivated organisms, yes. They could also be genetically modified. So whenever you're genetically modified, basically if I have to say in very simple terms, it's tampering with nature. Yes, although I might sound like an environmentalist, I'm not. But whenever you try to change the basic unit of any organism, you're basically modifying the genes, so it becomes genetically modified. Clear? So living modified organism is defined in the Cartagena Protocol as any organism which possesses a novel combination of genetic material. That's the word. Anything which is different from the naturally occurring gene combination, then it's a GM. So all GM related transfer, handling, access is dealt by which protocol? Cartagena Protocol. Now finally come to the last, sorry not the last, there's a heading called what does protocol cover? Transboundary movement, transit, handling, use of all living modified organisms that may have adverse effect. So wherever two countries are involved with trading or movement or transfer of genetically modified organism, Cartagena Protocol comes into picture. And if it's between two states, that central government will take care. Clear? Why will any international protocol interfere? Wherever two countries are dealing with genetically modified organism, Cartagena Protocol comes into picture. Now we will look at the special features of Cartagena Protocol. I've already told you one special feature is they follow a precautionary approach. Number two, they establish an advance informed agreement procedure. What does that mean? If India is the country which is sending a genetic resource to, let's say, a country called Sri Lanka, Indian government is responsible to send an advance information agreement saying this particular genetic resource has following advantages, following disadvantages, and these are the risks they may pose to your environment. So which country has to inform? Exporting or importing country? Exporting country has to inform, send an advance information agreement as per Cartagena Protocol. And finally, there's a biosafety clearing house. So something to regulate, which will try to facilitate exchange of information on living modified organism and to also help countries in the implementation of the protocol. So no matter what, no matter how many instruments you establish, you need one court sort of instrument to check. So biosafety clearing house is like a check mechanism for the entire Cartagena Protocol. Is this clear? Okay. Now, are the conditions of Cartagena Protocol also binding WTO? You know what's WTO? World Trade Organization. So World Trade Organization also deals with international trade between different countries. So when I am trading on genetically modified crops, will Cartagena Protocol also bind WTO? Definitely yes, alright. So if there is any dispute in WTO, they will refer to Cartagena Protocol for reference. Clear? Moving ahead, can we look at Nagoya Protocol now? Now Nagoya is nothing but the moment you think of Nagoya, if you are not able to recollect what the protocol is about, think about the NEEM example, Nagoya NEEM. Okay? So it's about access and benefit sharing. Look at the first statement, that's the main objective. It's on access to genetic resource, fair and equitable sharing of benefit arising from their utilization. So in short, it's called ABS, access and benefit sharing. Okay? Access and benefit sharing. So access to the genetic resource and fair and equitable sharing of benefits from their utilization. Why is this protocol important? Yes, such questions can also be asked in the UPSC. Either what is the objective of establishing the protocol or why is it important? Think of the NEEM example. Why is it important that we protect NEEM if US is trying to make a medicine? Yeah, what will happen? Okay, or otherwise, what if we don't protect the NEEM? US company makes a medicine on NEEM and patents it, then what will happen? We will have to pay for our own indigenous variety, alright? So to get some benefit to the developing countries, this Nagoya Protocol is important. Okay, what others? What are the other benefits? Why should India get some credit for NEEM? Okay, Neem, Tulsi are varieties which we know, which I think whether US buys it or not, we will still keep cultivating. Tulsi is still seen in some homes. Okay? Okay, rather I'll tell this very simple example. Let's say for example, you have a small rose plant at home. It started giving roses. Your neighbor every day comes and says, the flower is very beautiful, why don't you give, I'll take it for the God. She takes the rose every day. Okay, every day we don't get roses. Maybe once a week you get a rose and the neighbor takes away the rose. Will you now be motivated to water the rose plant? Who's taking the benefit of your rose plant? Neighbor. What will happen eventually? The same logic, clear? You're cultivating something, but the benefit of it is going to a neighboring country or somebody else. So you will be demotivated to even cultivate that crop. If you stop cultivating the crop, does your neighbor only knows to pluck the rose? Does she know to cultivate that rose plant? No. Same applies with countries. If your country does not get the benefit of cultivating a particular genetic resource over a period of time, that particular, let's say Indian community will stop cultivating those crops, and with that, the knowledge of cultivating that crop will die. Are you able to follow? So to even incentivize a particular country to preserve its genetic resource, Nagoya Protocol is important. Are you able to follow? Yes? So look at the statement. Why is Nagoya important? First, in the first line you have predictable conditions for access. So if somebody is taking access to Indian neem, we should know what are the consequences of it. Number two, helps to ensure benefit sharing. So if American company makes a drug out of neem, benefit should go to both American company and also Indians for cultivating the neem. And the last statement, incentives to conserve and sustainably use that genetic resource. So if any community has to grow their own resources, they should have some incentive that they are getting some money or some benefit because somebody else is using it. Else, like the rose plant example, you will stop cultivating and you will tell your neighbor, if you want, take the pot also and you can start cultivating the plant. Clear? Yes or no? Yes, in UPSC this happens when you realize you are making newspaper notes but you are not revising at all. And your roommate is revising them, scoring good in tests, then you will realize, anyway I don't read, it's better I stop making my newspaper notes. Yes? So when you see your own efforts don't give you benefits, you will stop the efforts. Are you able to follow? This is the third important point for Nagoya Protocol. Now what does Nagoya cover? It applies to all those genetic resources which are covered by CBD. Now only thing what you have to remember here, or what's important is, does Nagoya cover traditional knowledge also? Yeah, that's there in the notes, so you have to say yes. Okay, so what does traditional knowledge mean? Let's say for example, when we generally have a wound, what is the immediate thing your grandmother would do? Let's say you're bleeding, what do they immediately do? Turmeric. That's a traditional knowledge associated with turmeric. Okay, you have cold. What do they give you? Either pepper, tulsi, ginger, or a combination of all of the three. Yes? A combination of all of the three works best. This is traditional knowledge associated with the genetic plant. Even if any country is using this traditional knowledge for their benefit, let's say for example, a combination of ginger, pepper and tulsi is used to make a drug for cold, that country has to give its due benefit to India. Clear? That is why we say Nagoya does not just cover the genetic resource, but also the traditional knowledge associated with the genetic resource. Is this clear? Remember this can be tested in the exam. If they just want to ask you which of the following statements are correct about Nagoya Protocol. 1, 2, 3, 4. And what we generally notice in the, is, while you read notes, you read like this. You skim. And while you read the question paper, you read every line and think, ipdi irklama? Irklama. And you start doubting. Yes? So it's better you understand what these statements mean, so it's easier. Clear? Moving ahead, how does Nagoya Protocol work? That's the next question. Key mechanism. Just like we saw Kyoto, how do they work? So even for Nagoya Protocol, there should be one court-like structure which will check where is the genetic resource, where is it going, who is taking benefit. So that's called a clearing house. ABS clearing house is the key tool for facilitating implementation of Nagoya Protocol. That's it. Yes? Because Nagoya's main work is to find out where did the genetic resource originate, who took the benefit, and who is also sharing the benefit. Clearing house will see everybody gets the benefit, their purpose is solved. Clear? So they maintain an online record of which genetic resource is moving from where and which country has what all genetic resources. Is this clear? Okay. Next we have the Aichi biodiversity targets. Are they legally binding? No. Okay, they are just a set of some 20-25 targets which say we have to try to protect biodiversity. So I have not given all the targets in the notes because they seem like they are very repetitive in nature. So what we will understand, what are they? So there's a 2011 to 20 is United Nations Decade on Biodiversity. That's important because we are still in this period. So it will serve to support the implementation of strategic plan for biodiversity and promote its overall vision of living in harmony with nature. And this strategic plan for biodiversity includes some 20 time-bound measurable targets to be met by 2020, and by 2050 they want to ensure that biodiversity is valued, conserved, reserved, restored and widely used. So they are basically a set of 20 targets which have to be met by 2020. Long-term vision is by 2050 they want biodiversity to be conserved. Okay? This is not legally binding. They just saying protect biodiversity, protect lakes, protect this, protect that. Clear? Okay. Now, one more thing about Convention to Biodiversity is, see, this convention says that every country has to establish some national mechanism for implementing this biodiversity principles. Clear? Whether it is Nagoya Protocol, whether it is Cartagena Protocol, whether it is Aichi, at every country there should be a national level institution to implement CBD. In India, what do we have to implement CBD? You've heard of National Biodiversity Act, National Biodiversity Act, National Biodiversity Authority are all established to ensure that we are able to meet Convention on Biodiversity. Clear? Where is this given? If you go back in your notes, under CBD, There's something called mechanism for CBD. Yes, after I discuss the objectives, I skipped the mechanism. Yes, look at the mechanisms. So we just saw GEF is for funding purpose and we saw what is GEF. But look at the next slide, National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan. What are they? Principal instruments for implementing the convention at national level. The convention requires countries to prepare a national biodiversity strategy or ensure that this strategy is mainstreamed into planning and activities of all sectors whose activities can have an impact. What do they mean? In simpler terms, at the national level, either have an act or have a plan or have an institution which will implement the objectives of Convention on Biodiversity. Clear? So what do we have in India? We have National Biodiversity Act and we also have National Biodiversity Authority. Clear? Okay. Just taking you a little out of the notes into National Biodiversity Authority. What is their main function? Same meme example I will draw. Some foreigner wants to come to India, take the neem and do some research into the neem. They have to seek permission from National Biodiversity Authority. Clear? So what is National Biodiversity Authority's main function? Give access to any foreign institution or individual to access Indian genetic resource. What is the function of State Biodiversity Board? So there are three institutions in national, as per National Biodiversity Act. One is National Biodiversity Authority, State Biodiversity Board, and then finally we have Biodiversity Management Committee. Clear? I repeat, as per National Biodiversity Act, we have three institutions: National Biodiversity Authority, State Biodiversity Board, and Biodiversity Management Committees. Okay, UPSC has tested already a question on National Biodiversity Authority. SBB and BMC, we have not got a question. Okay, this was way back, I think almost 5 or 6 years back. What is the main function of National Biodiversity Authority? Give access to a foreign company or individual to access a genetic resource. Okay, give access to a foreign company or individual to give access to an Indian genetic resource. Now, what will State Biodiversity Board do? State level. Okay, yes. If any Indian company itself wants to do a research or access on Indian genetic resource, they will approach the State Biodiversity Board. Clear? Let's say Indian pharmaceutical company wants to make a drug from Indian genetic resource. They may get permission directly from State Biodiversity Board. Then what will Biodiversity Management Committee do? From the panchayat. They are at the panchayat level. They'll get permission from panchayat? Yes? Yes. At the local level, what they have to do is, at the local level, imagine these are panchayat members. They will not be in a position to give permission to somebody. All they can, what do they know best? They have the best knowledge of which biodiversity is available in their area. So record keeping, the entire record of what all is available in my village is done by Biodiversity Management Committee. Clear? So when all panchayats maintain record of all genetic resources, immediately it's all online. So immediately at the national level, we have an entire record of the entire genetic resources of the country. Clear? So Biodiversity Management Committee's function is to maintain a record of all genetic resources in that particular panchayat. Is this clear? Okay. Can we go back to the class? We have now finished Convention on Biodiversity. Yes? We will try to recollect, give a small glimpse and then I'll move to the next one. So Convention on Biodiversity had three important objectives. The first objective was conservation of biodiversity. What was set up for that? Aichi targets. Okay. The second objective was to ensure fair access, fair and equitable sharing of benefits out of genetic resources. What was established? Nagoya. The third objective was to ensure there's safe transfer, handling and access to living modified organism, and that was taken care by Cartagena Protocol. Starting with Cartagena Protocol, it's generally called Cartagena Protocol on biosafety. First thing, it deals with safe handling, transport and use of living modified organism. Its special feature is it follows what approach? Precautionary approach. Alright. And whom does it place responsibility on? Exporter or importer? Exporter. The exporter has to give an advance information agreement to the importer that these could be the possible consequences of this genetic resource. Alright. And then, yes, this will. And what will be the implementation mechanism for Cartagena Protocol? There is a biosafety clearing house. Then we spoke about Nagoya Protocol, which is on equitable access and benefit sharing. There, yes, we saw what are the importance of Nagoya Protocol. It will help, it will incentivize the country which is growing the genetic resource to keep cultivating. It will give equitable benefit to the country which has cultivated the crop, and also there is certainty to the developing countries on what to do if somebody violates the principle. Clear? All these mechanisms are mostly safeguards for developing countries. Developed countries, they have money, they have knowledge, they have legal certainty, they know what to do. But who gets exploited? It's the developing and underdeveloped countries. So Nagoya gives some amount of certainty to the developing and underdeveloped countries, so how to protect them and how to get the benefit which is due to them. And what is the implementation mechanism for Nagoya? You have access and benefit sharing clearing house. Alright? And finally we saw Aichi targets. In Aichi all we have to remember is 2011 to 20 is being celebrated as UN Decade on Biodiversity. Moving to the third important Rio Convention, which is UNCCCD. Yes. Now, this is the single legally binding international agreement which links environment to sustainable land management. What does this convention address? Dry areas, semi-dry areas, dry subhumid areas, basically whatever is known as a dry land, okay, whichever is known as a deserted land. Deserted land means no vegetation, okay, in simple. So no vegetation either because of deforestation or because of drought or because of famine. The UNCCCD 2018-30 strategic framework is the most comprehensive global commitment to achieve land degradation neutrality in order to restore the productivity of the expanse land. So what will you remember? 2018 to 30 is UNCCCD strategic framework to achieve land degradation neutrality. This is an information, okay? Just like 2011 to 20 was UN Decade on Biodiversity, 2018 to 30 would be strategic framework to achieve land degradation neutrality. Look at the next statement. So that is the main objective of UNCCCD. Improve living conditions for people in dry land, maintain and restore land and soil productivity, mitigate effect of drought. These three are the important objectives of UNCCCD. I repeat, improve the living condition for people in dry land, restore land and soil productivity, and mitigate the effects of drought. So all these conventions work together, UNFCCC, CBD and UNCCCD. Who funds UNCCCD? GEF, we've already seen. Yes, GEF funds UNCCCD as well. Moving ahead, we will look at Agenda 21. Agenda of Sustainable Development, and it's a voluntary action plan. It's a 40-point document, and look at it, very interesting. It will tell what every country has to do globally, nationally, what every state government should do, what every local government should do. When so much is said, nothing is done. Okay? For implementation of these points, a Commission on Sustainable Development was also established. United Nations Division for Sustainable Development acts as the secretariat to the Commission and works within the context of Agenda 21. Not very important. All you will have to remember is Agenda 21 also has origin in Rio Summit. It's voluntary action plan, some big 40-page document which says what everybody should do. Okay, you, me, everybody should do. With this we finish Rio Summit and their important outcomes. Is this clear? Any doubts? Were you able to follow the class so far? So many protocols here and there, some funding mechanisms. Yes? Okay. We'll take a break here and then we will start with other international organizations.